are back again. Whissel Weekends. Wow, what a great commercial. A little great review. Thanks for playing that there, Todd. It's always nice to hear those. All right. So during the break, we were just kind of talking about, when I mentioned my kids are 27, 26, Tom goes, wow, Jason, that's my age.
That's old I am, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we just talk about what you talked about right there, how generations has kind of changed, right? Because I got married, me and my wife were 20 years old when we got married.
Yeah, so basically I was just saying it's interesting. Like, Jason got married at 20, right? Had his kids, his parents, mostly back in that era, come back from war. They get married in their 18s, 20s, get a job, get a house. And I'm 27 and single and ready to mingle and not worried about getting married. And all my friends are getting married later in their age or having kids or finding homes at 32, where my parents, when they were my age, had their first house and all that stuff. So
yeah, so people are taking longer to buy a home typically, right?
Totally.
And get married, right? Your guys' generations not get married at 20.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or in the early 20s like my generation or my parents. And they're not buying homes like we did. I mean, I bought my first home. I was, 22?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was 22 years old.
I wish I had my first home by
Yeah.
22. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I literally was 22
Well,
years old.
I think it's because this generation kind of explores a lot more options too when it comes to careers. Kind of dabble a bit. I know that's what I did a lot in my 20s. I moved around a lot, all over the country, all over the world, and then I decided, okay, now I'm ready for something a little bit more permanent. So people make that decision a little later, whereas back in the day, people were making that decision when they were 18, 19, 20 years old, and they were settling down, having the kids. Now I think people are just wanting to explore those options, pursue other things that might have been a lot harder to do back in the day, but now it's a lot easier, especially when it comes to being mobile, trying new jobs, things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reading some of these articles on the baby boomers on downsizing. Are you ready to move? And pretty much the articles let me know that a lot of us in that baby boomer age are living longer, living healthier,
Yep.
therefore staying in their jobs longer, and therefore staying on their homes. And so some of the blame is that, hey, the baby boomers aren't selling as quickly as we thought they'd sell. However, it's a great time to sell because the market still is in a supply-demand shortage. And so we're still seeing homes go up. They're not going up quite as crazy. We've been talking about that. They've been slowing down, but it's a great time. If you're looking to sell, if you're a baby boomer, reach out to the Whissel team. You can reach out directly to Nick. God, my mind's blank right now on our text line, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give him your direct cell phone. This goes directly to Nick. Normally I text out Kyle's text number, but my mind's blank right now on it. So this is a good plug for you, Nick.
Whoa.
If you're thinking about selling, buying right now, here's who I'd reach out to. Nick, 619-933-7155. You can text or call him right now. Anytime this week.
Right now, midnight, anytime.
Yeah, there you go. But here's what's interesting on this article. 5.5% of households 65 and over moved, previously split between moves to single family, multifamily. But let's see. But one of the parts here, it says the aging of baby boomers, that within just a couple more decades, so this is saying by 2035, there'll be 78 million people over 65 years old, which I will be.
Wow.
Right, 2035, compared to only 76 million under the age of 18. So this article is saying on 2035, for the first time in the United States history, since they've been tracking these numbers, we're going to have more people over 65 than we have under 18. And part of that is your guys' fault because you guys are not having kids young like I did.
It could be worse. It could be like Japan. Japan's got this huge growing older population. Nobody's having kids. I think it's a worldwide pattern. But
Stuff's starting to
especially
happen.
here
I
in
mean,
the
I know
US.
China, they're limited to, how many kids you can have and different stuff.
Yeah,
so.
they raised it up from 1 to 2.
Yeah, so it's interesting what's going to happen in the United States. First time since we've been tracking.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I mean, in the 60s, you had contraception. I mean, that's a in the first time in humankind's history.
Isn't that wild?
Isn't that wild? I mean, what a day and age we're living in. You got airplanes, you got all kinds of stuff happening, but that was huge. And of course, that's being used more and more. So you've got fewer and fewer kids being had.
Yeah.
People know how expensive it is to have a kid. Every kid by the time they're 18 is going to be about $250,000. Isn't that about right?
Yeah.
About the
It's
price
expensive.
of a Bugatti or a Ferrari.
Hit my number 13 button there.
Number 13.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. says
How
Tracy
much
Martin.
money you said that was? 250?
$250,000 is
have a kid.
the data that I've read from age 0 to age 18. That's a whole lot of money. And then after that,
I
of
love you,
course-
Melanie, my daughter, but I think it was more.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, it was more.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you got college. It's crazy. Kids are super expensive. So I mean, they're great. I don't have any myself, but I'm sure they're wonderful. But it comes with a price tag.
Right,
for sure.
but here we are in October 2018.
Yeah.
And we're thinking 2035. That seems like a long ways away. But
It'll
as I was
be
just
here
telling you
before we
guys,
know it,
beginning of the
baby.
show, I met Kyle in 2001.
That's like 10
17 years ago.
Yeah.
And here we are less than 17 years from 2035 because we got 2019 here just in a few months.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You can
Absolutely.
keep hitting that button. I mean, it's going to be here. So,
What I'm
you know,
interested about that though is so you said how much? 78 million?
yeah, so they're projecting right now, let me read this again. By 2035, there will be 78 million people 65 years and older. And God willing, if I see 2035, I'll be 65 years old, compared to 76.7 million under the age of 18.
I'm
And that-
thinking about me. I'm gonna be like in my 30s. There's gonna be some job opportunities. I'm thinking people
Bring
are
'em on.
retiring.
if they retire.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But see,
if
that's
they
what
retire.
that's what we're talking about. I mean,
And-
you know what I heard this week?
Hmm.
Big Bird.
What about him?
Okay, you guys have all heard of Big Bird,
Yeah.
Sesame Street, right?
Was he like 80 years old now?
He's 83
no way.
years
No,
old.
I was overshooting
He's
it.
retiring.
What?
He's been the same character
Oh
for
my
50 years.
gosh.
Wow.
And then who's the guy that comes out of the trash?
Oscar the Grouch.
He also played Oscar the Grouch.
Oh,
he's
same
done the
guy.
voice. So he's the same guy for all these 50 years. He's done Big Bird and Oscar,
Oh
and
my
he's now
gosh.
retiring.
Holy cow.
But
That's
he's in
nuts.
his 80s,
wow.
right?
How about that?
So we talk about, you think there's going to be job opportunities, you never know.
Yeah.
And you're talking about how much it
Big
costs to
Bird's
have
fun.
kids.
Yeah.
You know, Todd's having fun here as we start looking at that. I mean, you're talking about some time,
Yeah.
right? But one of the things I want you guys to understand, and we can definitely get into this, both Tom and Nick, is if you're a renter, people we talk to every day, well, I can't afford to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, what are you paying for rent? And they go, I'm paying $2,000, $22, $23. You know, some people say $500. Well, if you got a $500 deal and you keep that forever, that's a great deal. But you're not going to keep a deal like that forever.
Mhm.
And if you are, you're not going to have privacy and something's going on if you're only paying $500 in San
And-
Diego for rent.
And
right?
you got no control over what the rent is going to be raised to. That's not in your hands.
you literally have no control. But here's what people don't realize. They literally see a $2,500 rent payment and they go, well, how much does it cost me to own a home, Jason? And I go, well, you know what? A mortgage payment's like, $3,300 for a $500,000 house. And they go, oh, can't afford it. But you're paying $2,500 in rent. And what they don't realize is all of them have heard of possible appreciation, but let's just say the values don't even go up.
Mhm.
They've heard that there's some tax deductions, right?
Mhm.
Meaning in the form of interest because you get to write that off. And although our deductions have gone up for the 28 tax bill that went through, so meaning there's a little bit less tax benefit, but there's still a tax benefit, just not as big as it was for 2017 and previous years, but it's still a great tax deduction for a lot of us. The thing that people forget is that when you're a homeowner, you're paying down your loan. So when you're paying down that loan, part of that $3,300, it's actually a forced savings account, kind of like our retirement 401ks, IRAs. When you have money withheld from your paycheck, and we all, when we first had the 401k opportunities, like, oh, I can't afford it. But when it comes off the top of the check and you don't see it, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I got $10,000 in this retirement account. A couple years later, hey, I got $30,000 because you started, you got it going. The same example, guys, for being a homeowner is the principal reduction. If you start with a $500,000 loan, well, every month you're going to be paying that from $500 to $800 a month, and it'll continue to go up as the interest goes down because over time, because your interest is going to go down because your principal balance is going down, it becomes a forced savings account. So I literally ran this scenario for a client. A $2,500 rent payment compared to a $500,000 home with 5% down. Their payment was $3,300 and change, but after their tax savings and their tax reduction, which is their savings, and the forced principal payment, because you have to pay down the loan. You understand when you pay down $500, you get that money back when you pay off the loan. That money doesn't disappear like your rent money. The net impact was $2,357 for owning a $500,000 home. Even though the payments were $3,300 and change, it was cheaper to own than pay a $2,500 rent.
So you're discounting about $1,000 between tax reductions and principal payment.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that's what people don't think about.
Nice.
Because when you compare numbers to numbers, 2,500, 3,300, well, of course, the 3,300 seems higher. And I'll just stay as a renter. But when you start to break in, oh, I get a tax benefit. Oh, you mean when I pay down the loan, I actually get to get that money back? What?
Mm-hmm.
Right? All of a sudden, you start to understand why the wealthy own. You know,
Oh, yeah.
There's nobody writing books, guys, out there that says, hey, become a billionaire like me for renting from a multimillionaire.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, I haven't seen that book yet, Tom, Nick, right? Like, you know, I mean, it's funny, but literally so many people just look at the cash,
right,
and they don't look at the deductions that you get back at the end of the year or what you pay the loan. It is wonderful equity to build by paying down your loan. That's how you gain wealth.
Absolutely.
In our society is by appreciation, which I even mentioned. That's not even a factor in that example right now, but that's a huge long-term factor. Long-term, home values go up.
Right.
Now, they do go up and down, but long-term, I don't care when you bought your house, today it's worth more than any time in the last 100 years.
Absolutely. It's diagonal. It's going up.
It's going up long-term. It always goes up, right?
And when it comes to your payment too, this is pretty alternative. Are you familiar with Bigger Pockets podcast? Either one of you two?
No.
Oh my gosh, I highly, highly recommend it. Big into real estate investment, buying your own home. Scott Trench wrote a book called Set for Life, one of my favorite books of all time. And he comes up with the idea of house hacking, where, again, this is pretty alternative. If you're a single person, this works out pretty well. You rent out a lot of your rooms. That way somebody else is paying your mortgage for you. So there's a lot of alternatives out there in the world.
I love that example.
Absolutely.
I know somebody that did that. I got a great example.
Ingenious.
We're going to talk about this genius real estate investor
Absolutely.
I know really, really well that you just reminded me about. I want to talk about that coming up right after the break. How you can become a super wealthy real estate investor, just like this person that most of you probably actually know who he is once I mention his name. I'll do it right after the break. Again, you're listening to 96.1 and AM 1170, The Answer on Whissel Weekend.